Hi, my name is Marissa, and I'm here with Will Houchin. He is a K to 6 music teacher in the Boston Public Schools, teaching general music and band. He's also the assistant director of Cambridge Common Voices. Take it away, Will.
Hi, everybody. Really nice to be here today to talk to you about universal design for learning. It's something that I incorporate throughout all of my teaching, both in the elementary school that I work at in Boston Public Schools, as well as our chorus at Harvard, Cambridge Common Voices, which is a great example of universal design for learning in action because it's a neurodiverse ensemble that's sort of based around the idea of trying to decentralize the music, the role of like the director of music, and really creating equity throughout the ensemble. So really happy to be here today.
Awesome. That's great. So, Will, can you start us off by just telling us what is universal design for learning? What's the big picture?
Yeah. So universal design for learning is a framework for lesson design and instruction that originally comes out of kind of comes out from the world of design and the world of architecture. And I think the best example I can kind of give to talk about it, to make it really clear, I'm going to share just a little slide here for us really quick, is to talk about what it's not. And so as teachers, one of the things, for years that we talk about is how we need to differentiate our instruction. And so you imagine that you will have a classroom of a general idea of typical learners, and that within that classroom you're going to have variations coming in, whether it's a student with a learning disability, a student with another academic need, English language learner, and then you are supposed to, once you get that student, identify their need and try to find some way to accommodate them or help modify the curriculum to meet their need. And really what that turns into is a very reactive way of thinking about instruction and thinking about our learners. And it feels like playing whack-a-mole. So I got this picture here of a boy. He's got a mallet and he's jumping around playing whack-a-mole. And as teachers, sometimes it can really feel like that when we get our students and we're trying to meet their needs. We're got to make this accommodation, got to make this modification. So universal design for learning basically flips that around. And it's the idea that we're going to anticipate learner variability and differences within our classroom. So the image I have right here is an image of a staircase. And then as this staircase, as you look, kind of zigzagging across it is a ramp. And so this is a staircase designed with the idea that either somebody who might be a wheelchair user or somebody who might need to use a cart or use something with wheels may also need to access this entrance or this entrance to this building or this plaza. And so rather than just leave the stairs and then build a ramp separately or use an elevator separately, they incorporated the ramp into the design. And so it's this sort of forward-thinking idea of anticipating the needs of all the users, or in our case all learners. I'm going to jump ahead really quick. So this is a definition that was taken from a definition for universal design, and I sort of appended it and edited it to apply to universal design for learning. But basically what it says is universal design for learning is the design and composition of instruction and a learning environment so that it can be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent by all students, regardless of their age, size, ability, or disability. By considering the diverse needs and abilities of all students throughout the lesson design process, universal design for learning creates instructional activities and learning environments that meet the students' needs. Simply put, universal design for learning is good teaching. But I think the main point that I try to get across with this idea of UDL is that we're anticipating variability in our learners. So we're being proactive with the way that we design our instruction, the way that we create our classroom environments, to anticipate the fact that we know that there's going to be a lot of different types of learners within our classrooms. I think it's important to know that there's always going to be disability present within our student groups. It's simply another facet of human diversity. The latest numbers from the CDC is that 26% or 1 in 4 of all adults in the United States have some type of disability. So when we think about that as educators, we know that we're going to have students with disabilities, students with learning differences, students with different challenges within our classrooms. Why not be proactive about it as opposed to being reactive about it?
Yeah, I love that proactive approach and really thinking about it beforehand. So instead of seeing that staircase and saying, "Oh, wait, now we need somebody else with using a cart or with a wheelchair who needs to use this. Let's tear down the staircase." It's already built in ahead of time. Somebody's already thought, of that possibility. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So, what does that look like in your general music classroom? What are some things you do with the physical environment or your instruction?
Yeah. So UDL comes out of actually reading curriculum that was developed in the early 90s by a group called the Cast Institute. And what they were really doing is they were harnessing the power of technology, which was becoming more readily available in schools. So when computer labs started becoming the norm in schools, and what it sort of came out of was the fact that, like, when you're reading something, we used to, the way it was printed on the paper was the way that you had to read it. And if you could access that reading that way, that was great. But if for some reason you couldn't access it due to low vision or some form of dyslexia, or just another issue with actually reading the physical text, you're kind of out of luck. And when we get these digital devices that now allow us to manipulate the text, make it larger, allow it to be read to us, change the color, that was really sort of the start of how UDL became into the classroom. How that translates to music is a little bit different. There's three main areas that we talk about in universal design for learning. And with these three things, I'll kind of walk through sort of what they might look like in my classrooms at different levels. So the first one that we talk about is this idea of multiple means of engagement, or this sometimes we're as the why of learning. And so when we're looking at the multiple means of engagement, we're looking at how are we motivating learners to do more things within our classroom. And so, for me, the way that looks is, providing a very consistent and deliberate structure within the lesson. So that's everything from just like the order with which we do things, being very consistent with how we do things, with routines and with procedures within the classroom, and also communicating that. So I use a lot of visuals. I use a visual schedule at the beginning of every class to communicate this is what we're doing. At different grade levels, it looks differently. So for my students in 5th and 6th grade, it's mainly written out as an agenda, but it may be more iconic or picture based for my younger students. Additionally, throughout my classes, I also try to provide a lot of student autonomy and choice. And this happens both at a micro level and a macro level. So it can be anything from choosing what part to sing or play in a song in a small group. So if I'm with my kindergartners, a lot of times when we're learning a song, I give them a few different ways to experience it. So especially if we're learning and we're really kind of focusing on learning the words or learning the melody, I might give them the option to, all right, this time you have the option of listening. This time you have the option of singing it, but singing it on a la. So you don't have to worry about the words. You're actually focusing more on the melodic contour. Or you can sing it you can actually sing the words with me if you're feeling that that's good. So that allows students who need another listen a chance to do it. That allows students who may be struggling with the language to still sing. And that allows students who are feeling ready to go to be able to dive in and sing with me. And the big thing that I do with that is I'm making sure that I'm not stigmatizing any of those. So I'm giving these students different access points for how they're able to engage with what we're doing. And that is also building in, that safety. A lot of things we talk about in teaching these days is, making our classrooms a safe environment. And I think this is really one of the ways that we walk the walk in doing that. Is by providing those access points, but also being like, hey, if you chose to listen this time, that's a-okay. I gave you that choice. I'm validating that choice, and I'm letting you do that. As the same as we would celebrate a student who chose to sing it with the whole words. And then, from that same activity, again, we're talking with 4 or 5-year-olds, and they're singing. I might ask them some reflective questions at the end with, okay, all right, how was that for you? Do you think were you able to match the pitch with that melody? Were you able to sing all the words? Do you feel like you're ready to try something different, a little more? Or do you think you want to listen again? And so I'm getting them to already to start to think about how they feel, which again, hopefully is not in a stigmatized way. It was like, hey, if I'm not ready, I'm not ready, and that's okay. But then thinking about, well, what do I do if I'm ready for the next step? So if I think I've got the melody in my head, can I try it with the words now? And so building in that idea of like self-assessment and reflection. And so that's the first thing. I'm kind of turning the structure on it because you're asking for a kind of example specifically for the elementary class. Let's see what I got in here. I just got lots of little charts here.
Lots of good.
Yeah. So actually, this is kind of going all over the place. Sorry, Marissa.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet a lot of teachers are doing some of these things in their classrooms already, maybe without even realizing or not. But I love that piece about being so intentional about the different access points, the way you can access the content, and it's okay to access it at any point. You can wind it forward and wind it back for people, for different students who need that. And also making it, getting the gears turning about assessing where am I at? Am I ready for words, or do I am I only thinking about the melody right now? Am I just there?
Yeah, another example, actually, now I kind of realize, let me go back to this. Another example is this song that we've actually done with Cambridge Common Voices, but I've done it with my elementary students as well too. And it is, this is an ostinato background part for the song "Proud Mary," and so you'd have students singing the verse to "Proud Mary," and then this is sort of a three-part ostinato that can be performed underneath it. And there's a lot of choice in what you can do here. And so there's obviously an example of, we've got different types of notation, different types of iconic notation. But for students who are feeling like maybe they're not really feeling into singing that day, there's a body percussion choice. So the top line is the emojis with pat, clap, pat, clap, pat, clap, pat, double clap. The middle line is a little bass line students can sing. They can sing "Ain't got no worry, no ain't got no worry." And then the bottom line is kind of like a little background harmony that goes moving, grooving, moving, grooving. And when I do this with students, I teach them all three parts. But then I give them the choice, in certain circumstances where it's like, all right, what do you feel comfortable doing today? And so that's just another idea of like giving that choice. And I think to go back to that idea of, honoring the different levels, music, I think traditionally, we hear the kid who sings really well. We hear the kid who plays really well. We're like, yes. We're like, yeah, we want everybody to aspire to be that. But in kind of focusing on that aspirational student or that quality, what we're also sort of building in is like, well, if you're not that, we're not celebrating you. So if you do create in access points where there are like, listening is an okay option, body percussion is an okay option, you have to celebrate that as much as you're going to celebrate the students who are going above and beyond and like maybe singing a solo, because then you're actually genuinely creating that safety and creating that community in there. Because I mean, kids, whether they're conscious of it or not, are going to realize it's like, oh, actually, they say we're in a safe environment, but if I don't sound like that, I'm not really, achieving what I'm supposed to be achieving.
Yeah. And I love those visuals for Proud Mary too. I feel like before you even start, you're identifying all these potential barriers to learning for so many different students who can access it by listening to you, by watching you, by following along, by looking at your visuals, um, and having the choice of which one to even choose. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And actually that like goes into like the next tenet of universal design for learning, which is the thing that, I feel like I'm really specialized in. And it's this idea of like multiple means of representation. And this is really how we communicate the information we're trying to get across to students. Whether it's an example like that Proud Mary, where I'm using, like emojis to show a body percussion ostinato, or kind of showing melodic contour with a line and text, to just different ways that we're, different aids that we're supplying for our students. So it's both how we're representing it and how the students are experiencing it. So, visual, oral, tactile, kinesthetic experiences and representation of all the information. The more modalities, the stronger the signal. We don't talk about it as much as more, but we used to talk about like, well, I'm a visual learner, I'm an oral learner, and I'm a, this learner, I'm a that learner. And I think there's a little bit of all of those different types in everybody. And depending on the circumstance, you may respond more to visual stimuli or oral stimuli. And so the idea is like, well, if you're only teaching in a certain way, if you're only speaking and singing and you're not, there's nothing visual for students to grab onto, if their auditory processing, isn't super strong, or they, are, they have ADHD and they're sort of losing focus and kind of drifting in and out, but you're only providing this auditory information. Well, then if they miss it that one time, it's gone. And so I'm really big on visuals because, music is an oral medium, but our teaching doesn't have to be. And then one of the things, one of my mentors told me when I was early on in my teaching, auditory information is temporary, but visual information is permanent. And so if you do have those students in class who maybe they are, they're losing focus, or their ability to process auditory information is really slow. If you have the visual, whether it's text or images or video, in addition to that, you're providing a stronger signal, because maybe they heard what you said, but maybe now they've kind of gone to another thought in their head, but now they see it still there. And so they're able to create a stronger connection to that. It's an outdated analogy, but I like to think about it, back when TVs used to have antennas on them. And, basically every time you add a different modality, every time you add a different way to represent your material, you're strengthening the signal of that antenna, and the picture is starting to get clearer and clearer. And it's becoming less and less fuzzy. Like I said, I feel like, that sort of dates me as far as my my analogies go. So I can give some examples of that if you want.
Yeah, that would be great.
So just so starting kind of back in this idea, a little bit related to the way that we talk about, creating structure with multiple means of engagement, in all of my classes and groups, one of the things that I try to do is I try to communicate our plan of what we're doing every rehearsal. So this is a schedule for our CCV at Harvard, and this will be up on the projector when the members get in. And so they're able to kind of look through the list of things that we're going to be working on over the course of the rehearsal. And it's just static. It stays up there. Because it's one thing if I want to say, oh, today we're going to warm up, do Sleigh Ride, Comfort and Joy, 12 Days of Christmas, Ocha Kanalikas, we'll do Random Time, and then it's the most wonderful time of the year. And then we move on, and that's all the information I give them. They might not be able to process that. And, we do have members with autism. We do have members who have anxiety. And one of the things that's really comforting to them is sort of understanding the structure of our rehearsal, when we're going to do certain things and why we're doing them. And so having this, this static visual schedule is just a support with that. For my students in my, elementary classroom, sometimes that looks like this. And so this is, for a 5th grade class. And so it's, we're working on some new chords on our ukulele. And so we've got the agenda there on the right and sort of our objective on the left. And as they're coming in, again, they're sort of seeing what's going, they're previewing what we're going to be doing for our lesson. Additionally, when I'm teaching band, one of the things that I think is really difficult, especially if you're teaching like in a beginning band setting where students are really just kind of learning how to read music, is kind of, talking up at the podium about what they're looking at on their stand and making sure that they're looking at the same thing you're talking about. So, the idea of like on the student stand, they might have a copy of the rhythm studies from the Standard of Excellence book, and I might be talking about number 6. But on my screen behind me, I've got number 6 blown up so they can look at it up there. And, I really don't care if they're looking at the screen or if they're looking at their book, but we're sort of on the same page. And so that's just like even representing it visually in 2 different ways so that we're just kind of very clear about what we're doing. Visual supports are huge, especially if we find, if you ever find yourself with saying, the classic, oh, haven't I told you like 1,000 times what to do? Or didn't I tell you guys last week? Or, this is how we put stuff away. If you find yourself saying that, maybe you might need a visual support. So some examples I could think about, for some higher level groups, like, like a high school marching band. I remember one of the big issues we had in my high school marching band was like forgetting to put things in your bag. Like, do you have your gloves or do you have your shoes? And so maybe that's a poster near the locker room in the band room that has like, these are all the things in your bag before you leave to get on the bus. And just to kind of give that little static reminder. One of the things I've done in my classrooms when I have a lot of percussion and I have the students put them away, I have pictures on the wall of this is what the percussion looks like when you put it away. And so I don't have to tell them how to do it and they don't have to remember it. It's just there and they're able to sort of use that. So with my Orff instruments, one of my classrooms, I just I took a picture of them, how I liked them, and then I put it up on the wall, and that was good. But I use a lot of visual supports again to, do some modeling. And I think, we learned through the pandemic, a lot of us got really good at video editing or using video to help teach these concepts. And that's something I want to keep because there's a lot of power in video modeling. So like if you create a video that's like posted on YouTube that the students can play along with, they can adjust the speed. It's also a common tutorial format that like kids are just kind of used to. I mean, half the things that I learned in tutorial videos on YouTube. And so we're sort of kind of speaking in that same language, in that same medium. And so you can create videos to kind of illustrate your point. And interrupt me, please, as I go on my rambles.
No,
Another
Will,
example is like,
these are great.
what was that?
These
Oh
are
yeah.
great
I
photos.
mean, another example, like, so here's an example of a common thing that, happens with flute players is like, when I'm teaching my beginning flute players, the idea of like, well, how do you hold the hands? Well, you could show them this picture up here on the top left of the woman playing the flute, and it's the picture, facing her. But if you're thinking about the idea of a student mirroring that image, they're going to hold the flute backwards. So then you could put the image that you see here kind of in the middle right, and you have, it's from the player's perspective and the hands are labeled. But the picture down at the bottom left is actually a picture of the student that I'm working with and their hands in the correct position. And so for me, taking that picture of that student's hand and, just printing it out, putting it on their stand, that is a huge visual support and a model that, is able to use. And again, it's something that's very easy to do, especially with the way that, technology works these days. I've been doing a lot with ukulele and finding different ways to represent things on the ukulele. And so this is, sort of how things look when I'm teaching ukulele. This is, both what I share on the wall in class up on the projector, but then I also build these as slides that the students can access on their Chromebooks independently. And so first off, using visuals of like, how do we play the C chord? So taking pictures, and I'm trying to take it from my perspective, from the player's perspective, as opposed to from the audience perspective, to really make sure it's easy to match. You'll see on my ukuleles, all of our ukuleles at my school are color coded with these colorful tape to, again, help reinforce just like the connection of where certain finger placements go. And then again, kind of walking through the steps of how to do it. And then a video, again, from point of view perspective that I just shot with my phone, just kind of sitting on a tripod over my shoulder, that they can actually see. And I want to make sure here, I don't want to do that rookie mistake of not sharing my sound. So let me do this. Boom. Okay. All right. So you can kind of see and hear from my perspective. Hey, here's another little ukulele lesson with Mr. Houchin from your point of view. Today we're going to be strumming a C chord. So the first thing we need to do is get our left hand in position. For that, we're going to take our third finger on our left hand, that's this finger right here, 1, 2, 3, curl it up and press it down on the first string on the blue tape like that. Look at that, just like that, push it nice and hard. Then we take our right hand, and with our fingernails, we are going to brush all 4 strings like this. And that we get our nice strummed C chord. Now, let's try playing some together. Get that ring finger, that third finger in position on the blue, on the first string. And then we're gonna strum 8 times and stop. 1, 2, ready, strum. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you should hear that nice C major chord sound when you strum. Yeah, so I really tried to just use as many different ways to represent something as possible, using colors to help support, using images, using video, and the fact, so much of what we do moved onto computers and, and being able to use things like Google Slides and being able to share that stuff with the students that we couldn't do, honestly, before the pandemic. It's actually been really helpful because another aspect of it is I can give that students that stuff in class while we're working together, but they can also use it independently on their devices and go at their own pace and maybe sit with those pictures or sit with those videos longer. And so it's been, a real boon to like, especially learning like instrumental techniques at all levels.
Yeah, that's great. I loved that example of in your beginning band of showing just the one exercise that we're working on and having that one posted up on the board. Because how many times have we all played one exercise together and we say play number 6 and everyone's like got it, number 6, and then one person's on number 8. and it's like, oh, let's try again. Somebody else is on number 9. So I love that it's just so proactive. That's a great idea.
Yeah. It's,
Um,
I mean, I right now it's, right now I'm teaching a band class of, 40 beginners at the same time, and it's me versus 40 kids. And it's everyone, it's students from, the self-contained special education classrooms, inclusion classrooms, English language learners, all on the same stage. And so I really got to figure out, I'm trying to anticipate, like, all right, what are going to be the miscommunications? What are going to be the areas where, like, I know students are not going to understand what I'm saying, and how can I make what I want them to do as clear as possible?
Yeah, and so it's so many music teachers are put into those kinds of situations where where you have a huge group of students of all different kinds of students, maybe even different ages, different all different places on their instruments. And as music teachers, we have to be so creative and so proactive to think of all the different ways that students might or might not be able to access what we're doing. And sometimes it's really about having a big a big toolkit and being able to
Mhm.
pick from the tools out of nowhere really quickly,
It,
figure out what
yeah,
works.
and really so rarely is it like the lack of a student's ability to do something. There's just some sort of breakdown or barrier within the communication process. And so when we talk about that idea of multiple means modalities, that's huge in sort of really making sure that we, the things that we are trying to get across, that we want the students to be able to do, where we're giving them every opportunity to understand our meaning and to then make sense of it themselves, and then, participate.
Yeah, exactly. It also really brings up the question of, do we always have to use this one way of notation? Is there a right way to do things? And I think that this is showing us that there never really is. There's many ways to do things, there's many ways to teach things and for our students to learn.
Yeah. The thing that I've been getting in with, especially with my band students right now, is I didn't want to turn band into another reading class so quickly.
Mhm.
Because I do know my students who do struggle with, with reading, whether it's because of some sort of like dyslexia, or, language processing, or visual deficiency. I really want to make sure that, I mean, reading the music is an important part of music, but it's one part of music, and I would argue maybe one of the lesser important parts of the music when you compare it to like playing or creating or making a sound. And sometimes that's actually the first thing we focus on, is, well, if you can't read it, then you can't play it, and then you're not allowed to play it, and then now you're walled off. And so I really try to kind of reverse engineer the way that I've been teaching band this year, where we really try to start with playing, start with, relating it to singing, start with relating it to what we know, and now we incorporate the notation, now we incorporate the reading, and we sort of and build those connections a lot stronger.
Yeah, I feel like that happens a lot, especially in band, more so than other sections like orchestra or chorus. Just a huge emphasis on note reading first, and it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so we can go to the final part of UDL for today, and that is this idea of multiple means of action and expression, and this gets to how the students show you their learning, how they show you what they've learned and what they can do, and the skills that you're teaching them. And a lot of this ties into the things that we talked about earlier with engagement and with with engagement and with multiple means of representation. So again, allowing them to use multiple modalities with showing their learning, and providing choice within their assessment, and then, building on those self-reflection skills we're using in the self-engagement part. So utilizing those multiple modalities, are they, in a general education classroom, this could be like, are they presenting a paper orally? Are they writing it? Are they creating a video? Using that same thing kind of in the music classroom. Are they, if they're doing like some sort of playing test, or they're sort of showing, what they learned, are they, playing it by themselves? Are they playing it in a group? Are they playing it on a recording that they were able to make at home and practice? Giving those choices of how they're doing it. Or similarly, even younger, like, are they playing, um, when you're in a general music classroom, are they playing, the musical ideas on an instrument? Are they saying it? Are they singing it? Are they using hand percussion? All sorts of things. And then when you provide choice, again, you know, is the thing, okay, you're going to play the entire page of music, or you're going to play a portion of the music that is important to you, or that you decided was, you know, something that would be a challenge for you. Again, incorporating those self-reflection skills. You know, it's like, hey, if a good goal for you is to play the first two measures, then that's your goal. If a good goal for you is to play this whole page, then that's your goal too. Um, and then part of that is, you know, within each lesson, we're providing different experiences for students. So in every lesson, are we allowing them chances to sing, chances to play, chances to read, chances to play by ear, chances to move, chances to listen, chances to compose or create, chances to discuss, and chances to write about what they're experiencing music. And this is for all levels. You know, this is really easy to do in a general music class, especially at a younger age, because a lot of what we do in our lesson design is about getting kids to do things, to sing, to play instruments, to listen, to move. But as we get a little bit older, that tends to go away, especially when we get to our instrumental ensembles. It's all about sit, read, play. But maybe providing those different opportunities within our classes gives students a different way to experience music and engage with the music. And then a big thing with assessment, and this has been coming in with my students, especially with who were playing ukulele this year, and my students who are playing in band this year. You know, I talk very openly about this idea about our focus is on growth and not on goals, and I try to talk that in a way that, you know, they understand. And so I'm very open, like, hey, you know, in my band of 40 kids, you know, some of you are going to learn this really fast. Some of you are going to be a little slower, and that's okay. And again, I'm not just saying it, I'm also modeling it with the way that I, you know, have been running the class throughout the year. And hopefully, you know, my actions are sort of backing up that word. But one of the things I do is, like, you know, I have the kids play for me in front of everybody, just because, like, logistically, that's kind of how we have to do it, just with our time constraints. But we really have built in this supportive culture where it's like, you know, we know what this student sounded like last week, and if they sound better, you know, we're all going to celebrate that, and we're going to celebrate the fact that they got better. And same thing. So if I have a student who's a really high achiever and they play something really well, like, we're going to celebrate that. And if I have a student, you know, who maybe was struggling to get a sound out and they got 3 notes out this time, we're all going to celebrate that. And it's been really cool to see the students sort of, you know, embody that spirit, especially this year. But again, you know, providing a choice in assessments, like, I might say, like, hey, pick one of these 2 songs, you know, that you think is that you want to do. And you can sort of choose how fast to play it, or, you know, how much of it to play. And again, you know, if you're able to provide different settings, whether they're doing it in a group or recorded, and again, you know, using those self-reflection skills. And so I think that's sort of like the end of this UDL piece, is how do we take the, you know, these different options that we're giving students, these self-reflection skills that we're giving, these different access points, and how do we turn that into assessment that's meaningful and honors all that stuff we talked about earlier? Because it'd be one thing if we then just assessed them by the old way. I was like, okay, well, you said you got to do the body percussion at the beginning, but how can you sing?
Yeah, that's a great point. That really wraps it up nicely. Um, yeah, that was awesome, Will. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I talk a lot. I'm talk very fast, so hopefully that, you know, some of that made sense.
Yeah,
But yeah, anything else that you're kind of curious or thinking about?
yeah. I loved all of your visuals too, and the visual supports for us. I think, did I see a picture of an adaptive flute in there?
Yeah, let me find that one. That's a flute by a company called, I think it's a Nouveau flute.
Mhm.
Um, multiple means of representation, visual sports. And so this flute has a couple of cool things for it. Let me pull that up again. Um, so there's a couple of really cool things with this flute. It's a flute by a company called Nouveau. It's a little bit larger. It's plastic. And they have, one of the options for it is you can get a J head joint. So if you can kind of see in this image that the head joint actually bends back around, so it makes it a little bit smaller. And the other thing that they have, which I've actually been using with another student, is they have um, um, a lip plate, a specialized lip plate that essentially has like a whistle on it. So if you have a student who's unable to form the embouchure, or for some reason, they can actually just put their lips on it like they're blowing a whistle, and it directs the air right at the right angle at the lip plate, and they're able to play. I have a student who's dealing with an issue where she's dealing with some facial paralysis right now, kind of out of nowhere, and she's playing the flute, and there's no amount of you know tips and tricks that are going to help her make a flute embouchure when half her face doesn't want to work that day. So we actually got another one of these flutes so that she's able to just blow into the whistle, and that's actually able to sort of direct the air and make it away.
Yeah, that's another beautiful example of how there isn't just one right way to do something. And
Yeah.
we can find another way to make it work, and it works beautifully for that student. That's amazing.
And I like to think, within my ensembles, because we have that idea of, we're giving different people need different things, and that's okay. It was, I mean, we kind of showed, like, I showed it off to the students, and I was like, oh, this is going for this student because they're having this problem. And like, it was such a cool thing to see, my students be like, that's so cool. Now she can play with us again. Yeah. Like, they were so stoked on it.
Yeah, that's
And I think, yeah, that's that underlying ethos of like, we're at different points and we need different things, and that's okay.
yeah. And students always pick up on their teachers' attitudes. So things like that, like everyone is different and everyone needs different things, and that's okay. And
Mhm.
sometimes something isn't bad, it's just different.
Yeah.
And yeah, your attitude about that is definitely showing in your students. Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
thank you, Will. It was so great to have you here and share so much about UDL and all of your expertise.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Internet.